And we're live. Good evening, Facebookers and members of my fabulous group. I'm very excited. Tonight I have a male guest, Mel Carson. Hi, Mel.
Hello, Katie. Hello, Facebook group.
I'm really excited to have Mel join me tonight. We've been talking about this for ages. We used to work together actually many years ago. We were just laughing about how many years ago when we were at Microsoft advertising together, weren't we, Mel? And Mel was a digital evangelist and he used to get paid to sit on Facebook. And we were just having a good chuckle about how back in the day, Mel would train us and talk to us and evangelize social media. And we all just wondered why he got paid to sit on Facebook. But apart from all of that, let's talk about what we're here to talk about tonight, which is personal brand or personal brand. And some of you know a little bit about personal branding and other people will wonder what the hell it is. So Mel is going to uncover what that actually means. And I think the thing is that, when I started talking to Mel, the fact is that our personal brand is out there. Whether we own it or not, we all have one. So I think that the point and the discussion tonight is around we should really take charge of it, uncover it, and have one and have ownership of it. So Mel is the founder and CEO of a company called Delightful Communications, which is a delightful name. And tonight it's also the author of a book called An Introduction to Personal Branding. I was about to get that wrong. An Introduction to Personal Branding. So he's an author, CEO at Delightful Communications, and he's going to give you, oh, there it is. Thank you, Mel. And he and I are going to talk all about his book and personal branding. So I'm just going to jump straight in, Mel, because I think I've done your intro. And also just to let you know, Mel is in Seattle at the moment. So thank you for joining us. What time is it over
there? 12:30.
Morning. 12:30 lunchtime.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's kick off, Mel. So let's start by just asking the question, what is a personal brand? Can you tell us what it means?
Sure. Personal branding, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, was famous for coining the term about personal branding as what people say about you after you have left the room, which is an interesting way to put it. It's what the interpretation, or what he says, the interpretation or the experience that people have with you, and what you put out there in person, but obviously now with the internet, online. And if you think about a traditional brand, a traditional company brand, what they're trying to do is make you feel a certain way. So Coca-Cola wants to make you feel happy. Somewhere like Microsoft that we worked at wants to make you feel like you're achieving more through their productivity tools and software and stuff like that. So when it comes to our personal brands, it's really thinking, and you hit the nail on the head about our personal brands being out there, whether we own them and whether we're cognizant and whether we're disciplined about planning and growing them. It means that, people who are looking for a job or looking to start a business, or even if they're very happy in the role that they've got in the company that they've got, it's really about the experience that people have with you in that role, and whether people can identify and get what they need from your wisdom and experience. So an example of that might be the fact that, when people are looking for a new role and they send out their CVs or their resumes or whatever, I mean, one of the first things people are going to do, hiring managers or, recruiters or whatever, is do an online search to see what shows up on social media, what shows up on LinkedIn. And what they're looking for is not just whether you've got the experience that you say you have for that particular role or whatever it is that you're trying to do, but that, people can actually see the value and they can trust that you're the right person for that particular job. So really, in a nutshell, it's the experience that people have with you, and whether you're sending out the right signals for whatever it is that, whatever career position you're in at that particular moment, that builds up really that trust with people, and it's the kind of thing that you would want people to say about you after you've left the room.
So I love that. I think what you've touched on there are two different things. So one is when you're in person, and it's what people say about you when you leave the room. So it's the impression you leave, who you present yourself as, how you package yourself. But as you say, also everybody's on social media. So you also have to be reflective of that on your LinkedIn, on your CV. So it's a whole package. So actually suddenly you are a brand, whether you're in person or not. And if you are that, and if you are packaging yourself up, and you need to, I mean, it sounds to me like you're sort of developing your own brand, like you would a commercial brand. How do you start to define your own story or what that personal brand is?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is to establish where you are. I mean, this is a professional working group, so we'll stick within those kind of guidelines, although the personal does come into it, and I know we'll probably talk about that later. But you need to think about, where you are in your career. Are you actually looking for another job? Are you looking to impress people further up within the company? Are you actually more senior and looking to attract potential mentees because you want to give a little bit back to the community? And all that rolls up into the first thing, is to think about who is your audience. Who are you trying to reach with your personal brand? Who is actually looking for your wisdom and experience? And then what you do is, once you know the audience, you think about what it is that you do. What are those goals? You know who your audience is, but what are your goals? Who are you trying to reach, and why are you trying to reach them? And then once you've figured that out, you think about your values. So what is it about your wisdom and experience? I keep talking about wisdom and experience, but it's really important that we don't just talk about things that you have done in your job, but it's also the value that you brought. So somebody might be a salesperson who's in charge of selling blue widgets. But what people want to see is, all right, how many blue widgets did you sell? What was the increase in, did you grow a team? And really think about the value that you can bring to them and that business. Or conversely, if you are a hiring manager and people are applying for a job with you, those potential candidates are going to be looking you up on social media. They're going to be looking you up on LinkedIn to see, what does this person, what is their experience? What can I learn from them? What are they sharing on social media? Are they as experienced as they're telling me? Are they the sort of person that I want to work for? So it kind of works both ways when it comes to that defining. So we kind of have a formula which, what is your mission? What are your goals? Who is your audience? What is the value that you bring? But then also take away the buzzwords, because LinkedIn every year, I'm not sure they did it this year because I think everybody's been a bit busy with COVID and all that jazz. But LinkedIn for many years has produced a list of buzzwords that people use in their LinkedIn profiles and the way that they approach people. It's things like results-oriented marketer and seasoned executive and all that kind of stuff. Because again, with a brand, we're trying to differentiate from the competition, because that job that you're going for, or those employees that you're looking to attract, you have competition either with another pool of candidates or with other employers. So how are you actually differentiating from those other people and making your brand and the experience of working with you or working for you really pop to that target audience?
Okay, so you covered so many different things there. One of the things that I've taken out of that is that your personal brand is important on every level. So for whatever aspect of your life you're in. So it's not just the personal brand if you're looking for a job. Even if you're a hiring manager, you need to have a perception and a personal brand. If you're a business owner, you need to have the same. So we talked quite a lot about that. But I think now people will be going, okay, so that this kind of sounds like I need to create something for myself. How do I do that? You talked a little bit about developing your skills and so on. And in the background, I'm thinking, well, that sounds a bit like a CV, but a personal brand is more than that. So how do you make sure that all these touch points come together and that you create some kind of cohesive story about yourself? What can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So, once you've figured out who your audience is and, what you're trying to achieve, and bring together that value, you need to build out those different touch points. So that touch point, so it might be LinkedIn. A lot of people have felt, in the past that LinkedIn used to be a job board. I still meet potential, clients or people that are interested in what we do for our clients who think, well, I don't need to update LinkedIn because I'm not looking for a new job. But things have changed and things have moved on. Thinking about, have you actually Googled yourself recently? What shows up for your name? What shows up for your name plus your company name? To see, do you have an established digital footprint? If you don't, then maybe there's opportunities depending on your goals. So if you're looking to get into, I don't know, some particular area like HR or technology or retail, what are you sharing on social media that pertains to those particular areas? Because if you're sharing that content or you're engaging with other people who maybe have a better footprint than you are, then that's how you start building up those different touch points, so that when anyone is searching for you or they're coming, they're coming past your social media channels, they can see, this person's applied for this job as a retail director somewhere. They're sharing really useful, interesting content about retail on their social.
Yeah, so that is such an important point, Mel. We talk a lot about LinkedIn profiles in the group, a lot. And some people are a little bit terrified of LinkedIn, other people are much more confident in there. I think that the thing that you've just touched on, which is really critical, is that much, much, much more than it just being your CV online or your CV profile. It's about your digital footprint, and it's about people say, I don't know what to say, I don't know what content, I just like things, what do I do? But you're right, if you're looking for a job and you go and search somebody who's looking for a job on LinkedIn and you can see that they're chatting and having dialogue and sharing content about what they do, it just sets them in such a different place, sets them apart from others. It's so important. But then I'm just thinking as well, and just go on.
Well, I've spoken to a lot of recruiters during our time. We've been doing this for about 8 years since I left Microsoft. And I mean, you talk about my evangelism role at Microsoft. I reverse engineered how I had the success that I had at Microsoft doing what I did to now help other people. And that whole story in the book about how I got laid off from Microsoft and the kind of upheaval that came from that. But when we've spoken to recruiters and they say, yeah, we don't just look at the CV, we'll look at the LinkedIn, but we will also do other searches. Because over the last 7 to 8 years, really, we've seen a huge surge of companies, big and small, really put culture at the heart of everything that they do. So the culture at the heart of that. So they want to see not just whether you've got the experience, whether you've not got just the value to back up that experience, whether they can trust you, but do you have the same values and will you fit in with that company culture? Are you doing volunteer work? There's a number out there. A big percentage of recruiters will scroll down to see whether you actually do volunteer work on your LinkedIn profile, because that's kind of a good tick in the box. We call LinkedIn now a living profile. It's somewhere professionally that you should be on, at least weekly, if not daily, learning from people, absorbing information, but also engaging with others and building up a footprint and a network of people who might not necessarily need your skills now. They might not necessarily need you next week, but they might need you at some point in the future. We've just started working with a company, a big renewable energy company, with a guy that I was at university with 26 years ago. And we've been following each other's careers on on LinkedIn, and he's not on any other social media, but on LinkedIn. 26 years later, he's now some hotshot SVP, and he needs our branding and our digital services. So people shouldn't,
isn't it? The connections.
and they shouldn't think about their personal brand as, Instagram superstars or YouTube or vloggers or anything like that. You're not going to get overnight stardom. You're in it for the long haul. People should take away from this conversation that this is something that they should be either up leveling or at least starting to think about, and use the discipline of thinking about your personal brand from now right to the end of their career.
So tell us, Mel, let's say people are listening, okay, I really want to think about my personal brand. What are the immediate steps that they should start taking? What are your tips to, if they could just check box off a few?
Yeah.
What would you tell them to do?
There's two things. I mean, there's a 10-step guide in the little book, which I think is like £3 or something on Amazon. The UK. Is two things. One is the infrastructure. So that is your LinkedIn profile. Do you have a good profile photo up there? Have you filled out, because I've seen people smoking and drinking and, the creepy crop shot of the wedding photo where somebody's arms, creeping over the top of their shoulder. It's thinking, about that from a professional perspective. Have you filled out all your last experiences? Have you put some detail in there? I think LinkedIn, if you search for rock your LinkedIn profile, they give a bunch of steps to go and do that kind of stuff. Thinking about, your social media, is your Facebook locked down? Because for a lot of people, Facebook's for family and friends, and that's fine. But is it locked down? Look at it through a public profile, or ask somebody else to look at it who's not connected to you. And they might see all kinds of stuff that you posted 10 years ago that recruiters could see because you didn't realize that you were posting it publicly. Take a look at your Twitter, your Instagram. Are there any pictures or photos or anything in there that you might, regret?
Or want an employer to see. Yeah.
And then the second thing is the branding perspective. And really, any old brand strategy is to look at who is your audience, what are your goals, what is the value that you bring, your value proposition? Why should they care about you more than your competition? And then really building out those themes and pillars. For a lot of people, it will be, I'm interested in HR. I mean, my personal ones are, I run a B2B tech marketing agency that helps companies and their leaders be more discoverable, shareable, and memorable. That's kind of our tagline. But I've also got this whole thing going on from a personal perspective. I'm speaking to you from a wildlife sanctuary and just off Seattle that we became guardians of. So I'm really into kind of nature and trees and beavers and stuff like that. And so that adds a little bit of intrigue and interest into my personal brand.
Story.
Yeah, and adds as part of the story. So think about the infrastructure. Think of the internet as a high street. When you're walking down the high street, are people going to want to go into your store because you're the bright Apple store that's got all the lights on and it's inviting and people want to come in and it feels warm and warm and cozy? That's kind of, but you get what I mean. But inviting and trustworthy, and you know what you get? Or are you the dodgy boarded up shop with graffiti all over it that people wouldn't have touched with a barge pole? Or given the choice.
The problem is that our lives are just completely transparent now through social media. I mean, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. Can you still hear me? Yeah. I mean, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So I think it's quite hard to separate your personal persona from your business persona. And so what you're saying is essentially we're pretty much an open door here. So how do you manage that? So let's say that your personal life is not something that you particularly want your business people to see. Yes, you can shut down your Facebook. Well, I don't know. I mean, some people, I think you're absolutely right. As I recruit, I look at people, search LinkedIn, Facebook, I look at their social footprint. and it gives me an overall impression. And that's what you're talking about, really, isn't it? It's your personal brand. Your personal brand is a mix of all the different parts of you, and it's hard to distinguish them. But for some, they might not want to. They might have a professional persona and want to keep their personal persona quite different. Is it possible to create a personal brand if you're not prepared to sort of merge the two in some way?
No, we again, we talk about in the book having a social media ratio. So what are you comfortable putting out there on social media professionally versus personally? You can lock down Facebook completely so that only people, you know, within your immediate, we have that with a lot of executives that we work with. They're like, no, Facebook is off limits. Excuse me. So is, you know, so is Instagram, Twitter for business, and I don't mind posting some pictures of, you know, my kids playing soccer or whatever. In this day and age, though, you know, that whole church and state between professional and personal, this thing, technology has blurred the lines between. I mean, that's part of what your whole group is about. It's about flexible working and being able to flex in, you know, personal and professional lives. So, you know, technology has blurred those lines, and so you don't have to talk, you know, about tons and tons of personal stuff. But all I'm saying is it helps, because especially now with everything that's going on with COVID, those lines are being blurred. If you think about, you know, the amount of times, I mean, we've had some conversations, and, you know, kids have come in and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're trying to humanize your brand as well, because people don't just want the work. They'd like to know that they can work with somebody, you know, who they are, that they trust, but that you're just showing a little bit of, you know, the human side. Because very often it's an icebreaker, and it's just interesting, more interesting.
And actually, what you said before about people hiring because they think you might fit the culture, that completely, because you're not just a business persona, and you can't be, because actually you're hiring a real person who has a life, and you have to fit culturally into your organization. So, you know, I think it's quite hard to define the two, and I think you have to bring your whole self, because they need to see that you're a good fit. So the other question I think that people might be asking, and you have already touched on it, is that I can see personal branding being really relevant for business owners, businesses, but if you're an employed person, you've talked about it being just as relevant. So just touch on why it's not just as relevant, and it's not just the fact that it's a merge of our Facebook profile and our LinkedIn profile. It's more than that. It's a story, and I just think it would be good for you to touch on kind of that bigger story in creating that.
Did you say from an employee perspective?
Yeah. So if you're employed, yeah.
Yeah, we get a lot of companies asking for workshops, and they're like, you know, I don't want our teams to have great, you know, I'm not interested in necessarily the LinkedIn side, but more internally within our company culture, you know, how can we bring out those stories? So again, I mean, within a company, I mean, our company is 14 strong, but everybody internally is slowly growing their personal brand as to what they're good at, what they can be trusted with, who they should be turned to as, you know, the fun one that organizes, you know, the Friday morning seltzer morning meeting or things like that. But in larger companies, it's how you show up to meetings like this. Are you late? You know, are you the one that's on mute? Are you the one that your technology never ever works? Is your dog always barking in the background? Are you the one typing and not listening in? Are you the one that talks over other people? And that all sounds...
Mel, you're describing me. I mean...
You talked over me. No. Yes. No, I'm not. You're great. But you know, internal meetings, you know, one-to-ones, how are you showing up? Because internally, when you work as a part of a team and as part of, you know, an all-up company, which, you know, the word company comes from theatre company, where everybody has their own role, you need to make sure that that your personal brand is something that people can know that they can rely and trust on. Because if you've got a fantastic team and one person is that kind of bad egg that hasn't got their stuff together, then that can make the whole, the whole house of cards fall down. So that's why it's important to think about that from an internal perspective. I mean, I got my job at Microsoft because my first job, I used to get into the elevator in the morning. We were on the 8th floor. It's a company called LookSmart back in the .com days. I mean, like 2000. And I used to get in the elevator with the CEO and ask him a question about something to do with the business. And I did that. It was strategic because I wanted to learn more about the business. But I also knew that it probably made, I was probably the only person at the company that ever spoke to him because he was the CEO. And that helped build up my brand internally because I was asking these questions and I was really keen and interested in stuff outside of my sphere of reference or outside my actual role, that when new roles came up and I applied for them, I got them over and above other people because I knew more about the rest of the business, but I'd obviously made an impression with people further up the chain. So
given me so, I was going to say, you've given us so much food for thought. Go on. I keep interrupting you.
That's all right.
You've given us so much food for thought, and you've covered so many different aspects here. So when I started this conversation, I thought I knew what personal branding was and what you were going to talk about. And actually, you've given so much more to the picture. And you're right, Mel. I mean, I hadn't thought about it like that, but your personal brand is everything, isn't it? From the moment you say hello to the receptionist, to who you talk to in the lift, to if you turn up late for meetings, if you are the one whose tech the tech never works and dogs always bark, all those things, so you are that person. So if you want to be that person, be that person. But actually it's that whole perception that makes you that whole. And I mean, you used to be, when I just remember working with you at Microsoft, and you talked to everybody, knew everybody, you were, whatever role you were in, it didn't matter. You were that person. And I think that's also really important. It's how you connect with other people when you're not just doing your job. It's so much more than that. So when people say, well, what is your personal brand? It's not just trawling through your LinkedIn and your CV and making sure your story's straight. It's everything that represents you. And I think you've given us a lot to think about tonight. So we're running out of time here. It's gone so quickly. It's already 9 o'clock, and I've loved it. I don't know if we've had quite a number of people live watching it. But if anyone's got any questions for Mel, drop them in the comments, and Mel will come back and answer them. If we've got time, we'll answer some at the end. Or we're actually at the end. But I wanted to ask you, Mel, if can you name or give us a couple of examples of people who have developed fantastic personal branding for themselves? Maybe some less obvious ones.
Yeah, well, I wrote a couple down. I think you have.
I have. Oh,
yeah, within your group, coming from the days when you did wonder what the hell I was doing. But what I love about that is the fact that you remember that and you admit.
Yeah, I do.
That wasn't very, forward thing. And I remember the conversation we had, I think it was, a few months ago around this, that, once the penny dropped, you've just grabbed it by the short and curlies and just gone for it with this group. And what you've done is absolutely amazing. And the fact that you put all your guests in the hot seat, and you put them out in front of you, but also a very, very obviously deep and caring about your community. So I think you've done a great job. I wrote a couple of things down here. There's a guy
Thanks,
called
Mel.
That's all right.
Called what?
Checks in the post. Jack Wallington. If you do a search for him, he used to work with us in the IAB, the Interactive Advertising Bureau. And a lot of people come to us and say, I work in advertising and I want to become a famous gardener. Well, he's done it. If you look up Jack Wallington, he's all over social media now, and he's now writing gardening columns. He's got 2 books out, and he's writing gardening columns for the Daily Telegraph, and he's all over the place. And he's taken, 7 or 8 years to build up that brand, but he is such a lovely guy, so smart, always learning, but also he's very, very engaging. I think a lot of people think for a personal brand that they should just be pushing out content and telling everybody how wonderful they are. But actually, engaging with other people is hugely important, to build that out. And then I know that there's a lot of women in the group. I love Rachel Burden from was it Radio 5 Live. She's on there from the BBC. I love the way the way that she is very excellent at what she does as a journalist. The way that she's on Twitter and she's always asking questions and engaging with people. And then occasionally she'll show pictures of her completely and utterly knackered after a long news week where she's still dealing with the kids and lockdown and all that kind of stuff, and that she's very, very accessible.
She brings her full self.
Yeah. And then one person, and this just goes back to something that you'll understand from your Microsoft days, is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. If we want to leap up a few levels, what he has done for that company just through his personal brand of putting customers right at the heart of it, empathetic, honest, open. When he's messed up, as he has done a couple of times with some of the things that he said publicly, immediately come back and paid his dues in spades for some of them.
He's such a different guy to, we were there in the Steve Ballmer days. He was just a showman and used to prance across the stage cheering and whatever. And Satya was such a considered, bright, smart man, and he has developed and carved out such an incredible personal brand for himself. That's a great example.
What he's done with through accessibility and diversity and inclusion and things like that are just amazing. Another woman on that front is Jenny Leigh Fleury, who we worked with back in our time, who's the chief accessibility officer at Microsoft as well, and she's all over social media and responds to everything, doesn't have a handler and all that kind of thing. So I hope that's some good examples of people that have trodden.
Amazing. So, as I said before, I think you've given everybody who's listening amazing food for thought and start of an action plan for how to now start to think about developing their own personal brand. And it's so much more than just updating your CV or your LinkedIn profile, although they are very important to do, but having a cohesive story and knowing that your full self, how you behave, think, act, talk, and do, all makes up your personal brand. So, Mel, you've got your book and you've shown it, which people can buy. It's just a few quid on Amazon. I downloaded it years ago and read it. It's very easy to read, and it's really it's a really good step-by-step guide to how you could do that. So download the book. Or Mel, we'll drop your contact in, and if anyone wants to get in touch with you, I know that you work with businesses and individuals on helping to develop and create your own personal brand. So if you did want coaching and consulting, then you can speak to Mel directly.
Sure.
And reach out to him. So that leaves me just to say thank you, Mel. Thank you for being my first and most brilliant male guest. I definitely should have more of them. It's been a pleasure having you on as a guest after our many, many years ago working together. And thanks everyone for listening. And if you've got any questions for Mel, drop them in the comments and he will answer them or get back to you, and we'll leave his contact. Thanks everyone.
Magic.
Thanks,
you, Kate.
Mel.
Everybody.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye. Bye. You still there?
I am. Are we off?
No, I think we're still on. Hang on. Stop.